Welcome to this session on applied ethics. Here we discuss one of the bioethical issues, cloning. The word clone was coined by H.G. Weber in 1903 to describe a colony of organisms derived asexually from a single progenitor. He chose this word because, among other things, it was short, easy to pronounce, and different from many other words in ordinary use, so that it would not suggest any other meaning than the one desired. However, the common perception of cloning was later changed, at least in part, by an influential 1970 book by Alvin Toffler, who predicted that man will be able to make biological carbon copies of himself. This statement changed the concept of what clones were from simple progeny of asexual reproduction to sophisticated products of biological engineering. Cloning is the process by which a genetically identical copy of a certain bacteria, plant, or animal is produced by asexual reproduction. There are two types of human cloning: therapeutic cloning and reproductive cloning. More likely to achieve a therapeutic cloning is more accessible in terms of technique, but also less morally problematic. Ethics of human cloning has become an important issue in recent years. The ethics of cloning refers to a variety of ethical positions regarding the practice and possibilities of cloning, especially human cloning. Cloning does not produce an exact copy of the person cloned. What is cloning is that it copies itself and creates a duplicate DNA or genes. The person will not be a Xerox copy. He or she will grow in an environment different from that of the clone, with different experiences and opportunities. Genetics does not define a person or personality in its entirety. Advocates support development of therapeutic cloning in order to generate tissues and whole organs to treat patients who otherwise cannot obtain transplants, to avoid the need for immunosuppressive drugs, and to save off the effects of aging. Advocates of reproductive cloning believe that parents who cannot otherwise procreate should have access to the technology. Opponents of cloning have concerns that technology is not yet developed enough to be safe, that it could be prone to abuse, that is, leading to the generation of humans from whom organs and tissues would be harvested, and have concerns about how cloned individuals could integrate with families and with society at large. There are many medical benefits and disadvantages of cloning and its technology. They include the following potential health benefits. That is, 1. The possibility of cloning technology to learn to renew activity damaged tissues and grow new cells to replace them. Number 2. People's ability to create genetically identical to donor organs such as kidney, bone marrow, transplant, etc. Third, the ADR benefit of studying cell differentiation at the same time as the study and development of cloning. Fourth one, sterile couples will be able to have children who will have the genetic information of the mother or the fathers. Potential risk or disadvantages. Cloning creates identical genes. It is a process of replication of genetic constitution, so preventing genetic diversity. Reducing the diversity of genes weakens the ability to adapt. Cloning is also detrimental to the beauty that comes from diversity. While human cloning to allow genetic mixing with humans also makes the reproduction characteristics likely to be undesirable. The cloning of human organs and their use for transplantation or cloning human beings must be taken into account technical and economic barriers. Cloning organs will be more efficient and costly, and cloning techniques will never reach the ordinary people. Clones may be treated as second-class citizens, which are only created as organ donors. If people will be cloned, clones will hopefully receive the same rights as any other human being. Some ethicists fear that the clone's rights will be broken. Paul Billings, co-founder of GeneBeige, was involved in drafting an international document that would ban reproductive cloning and genetic engineering of microbial limits. As argument against human cloning, he quoted, "Nobody has the right to have a genetically related child. Cloning is not safe. Cloning is not legally required medical." Ethical issues of human cloning. Ethical issues of human cloning have become an important issue in recent years. Many ethical arguments against human cloning are based on misconceptions. Many people think that these clones will have the same characteristics or personalities as the person cloned. Although clone and cloned individual have the same genes, traits and personalities are different. People think that a clone is physically identical to the donor and her behavior, but this is not true because although there is a physical identity, living environment shapes an individual's ongoing behavior and psychology. Many people believe that cloning will lead to loss of individuality eventually, but people have their own personality cloned with personality similar to those in which they were created. The most basic ethical case against human cloning is that no human being should have their complete genetic makeup predetermined by another human. Of course, parents influence their child in numerous ways socially, and children can accept or reject these influences, but they cannot change their genes. And in most speculated uses of cloning, the clone would not be created for its own benefit, but for another's. This is too instrumental. Humans are more than means to someone else's ends. In one sense, cloning runs counter to the evolutionary need to maintain a level of genetic diversity and to the variety God has created in nature. But we don't regard identical twins as any less human for being genetically the same. We often say how different each is because humans are far more than just genes. But the mere existence of such twins does not justify the practice of cloning. Ethically, twinning and cloning are very different. When an embryo splits spontaneously to make two genetically identical twin babies, their genetic composition is new, never existing before. It is random, uncontrolled. Cloning would select the genetic composition of an existing person and try and make another individual with the same genes. It is an intentional, controlled act to produce a specific non-end. Not only is the clone born with someone else's genes, but a third party has predetermined what his or her genetic makeup shall be. This control is an inevitable result of cloning. To clone one member of a couple to solve infertility would not only be instrumental, but would also raise other profound problems. No one knows the psychological effects of discovering one as the twin of one's parents, biologically the child of one's grandparents. Ethical issues in animal cloning. The progress in animal cloning science has been exponential. The first successful attempt at cloning was made by scientists at the Roslin Institute in Scotland in 1995 when they cloned two lambs, Megan and Morak. The lambs were cloned from cells from an early embryo. A year later, the same scientists cloned Dolly, this time beginning with a cell of an adult sheep. In the last 8 years, scientists have not only cloned other species, but they have advanced the science of cloning to now include genetic modifications that serve particular pharmaceutical or agricultural purposes. The first set of problems raised by animal cloning are consequentialist in nature and focus on the possible untoward outcomes that may result from this science, according to Rowling 1981 and Singer 1975. The negative consequences to animals can be both narrowly and broadly construed. Narrowly construed, focusing on animals involved in cloning procedures, the most serious consequence is the pain and suffering they experience in the cloning process. More broadly construed, the negative consequences to animals include the deleterious effects of cloning on other populations of animals such as livestock, unwanted pets or endangered species. Human beings may be adversely affected by animal cloning either through the slippery slope of perfecting reproductive cloning techniques on animals and then applying them to human reproductive cloning. Animal cloning is also criticized on deontological grounds, according to Regan 1983. Here there are ethical concerns about playing God, the intrinsic value of the animals and the objectification and commodification of animals. In the area of pet cloning, there is the potential for false promises. Grieving pet owners may be misled to believing that cloning will resurrect their beloved pet, and they may commit to storing their pet's DNA without understanding the true cause of cloning when the technique becomes commercially available. All of these are ethically salient issues, some addressing the moral permissibility of the science itself and others addressing issues that arise from the way in which the science is conducted or commercialized. Perhaps the most compelling argument against animal cloning is the very real suffering endured by animals involved in the science. There are 4 areas of concern with regard to the pain and suffering animals experience due to human cloning. The suffering animals undergo during cloning procedures, the obstetrical complications that occur in the surrogate animal, the health of cloned animals, and the suffering animals will be forced to endure if cloned to exhibit for research purposes or for certain diseases and pathologies. Cloning negates the intrinsic value of animals through both objectification and commodification. In this view, cloning treats animals as mere things rather than living, breathing, sentient subjects. While cloning opponents admit that animals are already considered property and products, they argue that cloning takes this objectification to new levels. Life for animals in agriculture, research, and the pharmaceutical industry is already bad enough. Cloning will desensitize us further from the suffering of these entities and consider them as a thing category. If animals are simply objects that we can create, then how different are they from disposable products like automobiles or telephones? Surrogacy and in vitro fertilization. Surrogacy is often referred to as womb renting, wherein a bodily service is provided for a fee. The practice is fraught with complexity and controversy surrounding the implications for women's health and human rights generally. Society is only beginning to grapple with the issues that it raises. Increasingly, surrogates function as gestational carriers, carrying a pregnancy to delivery after having been implanted with an embryo. Since the surrogate usually has no biological relationship to the child, she has no legal claim and the surrogate's name does not appear on the birth certificate. The concept of surrogacy is a byproduct of artificial insemination and in vitro fertilization techniques. In a surrogacy arrangement, a woman carries a fetus in her womb throughout pregnancy, and after delivery of the newborn, it is handed over to another family who is unable to have a child on its own. the surrogate mother will be free from all responsibility to the child or its family. Surrogacy is actually the most low-tech treatment to overcome infertility. Surrogacy is of two types, genetic and gestational. In genetic surrogacy, the ovum of the surrogate is artificially inseminated by the donor's sperm, that is the father of the child. In gestational surrogacy, the ovum of a woman is fertilized by the sperm of a male in vitro and the resulting embryo is implanted in the uterus of the surrogate. Married couples look to surrogacy when the wife is physically unable to conceive a child due to absence of the uterus or a disease, or when the wife is just unwilling to carry a baby. She may have a genetic disease that she is unwilling to pass to her offspring. She may not want to become pregnant because of her busy schedule. The couple may choose surrogacy over adoption because the child will be at least half related to them in genetic surrogacy. Sometimes unmarried couples look for a surrogate mother, although the practice is not very common. Similarly, this practice is open for a single man willing to be a father or to a homosexual couple who want to have a child. When a woman is incapable of producing ova as a result of disease or normal aging, the surrogate can provide the ovum that is then fertilized by the woman's husband and then implanted in the surrogate's uterus to carry the fetus to term. The surrogate then delivers and hands over the baby to the couple, that is in genetic surrogacy. This technique allows postmenopausal women or many women once considered hopelessly barren to become mothers even though they have no genetic link to the child. Surrogacy can be either commercial or altruistic. In the former case, the surrogate is paid for donating the egg, gestating the fetus, or both. In altruistic surrogacy, the surrogate is unpaid and the resulting baby is regarded as a gift to the couple. A few of the many issues raised by surrogacy include: 1. The rights of the children produced. 2. The ethical and practical ramifications of the further commodification of women's bodies. Number 3. Without regulation, fraud committed by surrogacy companies cannot be prevented or prosecuted. Number 4. The exploitation of poor and low-income women desperate for money. Number 5. The moral and ethical consequences of transforming a normal biological function of a woman's body into a commercial transaction. Advantages. Surrogacy is advantageous in many ways. It is considered to be one of the best methods against adoption. As compared to adoption, the couples interested in surrogacy do not have to worry on the background, family and lineage of the child. With surrogacy, the child has your own flesh and blood and even biologically belongs to you. Surrogacy is a wonderful option for intended parents to have a biological child. Same-sex couples can also try this process to have their own child. One of the most important stipulations to remember on surrogacy is that at least one of the intended parents' own cell is used for the conception of the child. This is to avoid any legal complications or problems that may arise once the child is born. Secondly, the surrogacy one parent has to be the donor of either the sperm or the egg for the fertilization process. Therefore, in this way, the child is biologically linked to the parents. The process of surrogacy is kept confidential. This is yet another added advantage of this process. Several certified fertility clinics that carry out the process of surrogacy maintain top-level privacy and therefore, the parents and the child are protected. Disadvantages. Surrogacy process has also various disadvantages. Couples have to understand that it is not always easy to find a surrogate. The job of finding one can indeed be tedious and strenuous. Several legal processes and laws governing surrogacy can often prevent couples from getting it done. The legal matters are also complex and unmanageable that at some point all these may seem to be an endless task and the process is very expensive. Surrogate fees are generally very high, and when it is clubbed with other associated medical expenses, couples may often wish to step back. In many instances, it may so happen that the surrogate mother may often fight for the rights of the baby. She may change her mind and may want to keep the child. In such situations, the legal matters often get complicated, which again is a matter of stress for the couple. Surrogacy can be a tedious and difficult process, especially for the first time intended parents. There are many processes involved with surrogacy, ranging from finding reliable surrogate mothers, legal processes, financial matters, and medical procedures. The best solution to work around this major disadvantage would be to do a bit of research before making any final decisions on surrogacy. Surrogacy is an expensive process. The average cost of surrogacy would range about $50,000 to $80,000. There are different costs that intended parents would have to cover on surrogacy. Some of these costs are medical bills, attorney fees, medications for the surrogate mother, and payment to the surrogate mother. Ethical issues in surrogacy. Surrogate motherhood raises complex legal and ethical issues. The question whether surrogates should be paid for their work in gestating the children of others is highly controversial. In some states in the US, paid surrogacy is legal. Other states only allow the surrogate mother to be compensated for medical and legal expenses, not for the actual service. To some, the issue is that compensation devalues gestation by labeling it as work. Carrying a child in the womb should be a function of love and relationship, not monetary gain. Another serious ethical concern is treating children as commodities. Joseph Bacom, a lawyer who fought against allowing paid surrogacy in Washington state, argues that tying financial incentive into protecting a child's welfare is morally wrong. However, neither of these arguments presents a valid reason not to compensate surrogates. The job of rearing one's own child is also crucial to the bond between a mother and child, yet some women choose to delegate this role to someone else. However, there is no dispute over whether mothers should pay child care providers. Surrogacy should be viewed the same way. On the practical side, compensation would also provide incentive for surrogates to adhere to standards of behavior during the term, such as taking prenatal vitamins and giving up alcohol. Regarding the issue of commoditization, it is the contractual nature of surrogacy rather than the money involved that is the more dehumanizing aspect. Compensating the surrogate rewards the woman for her service but does not compromise the value of the child. According to Ray, whether the surrogate is paid or not, the fact remains that she is under contract to produce a product. If this is the morally troubling aspect of paid surrogacy, then the entire business is at fault, not just the matter of compensation. The rights of the surrogate mother are also central to this debate. Many see compensating surrogate mothers as a form of exploitation, especially for poor women. Women with limited prospects in life could be enticed to commercializing their bodies for financial gain. Assisted reproductive technologies. Assisted reproductive technology is a medical improve an infertile couple's chance of pregnancy. Infertility is clinically accepted as the inability to conceive after 12 months of actively trying to conceive. The means of ART involves separating procreation from sexual intercourse. The importance of this association is addressed in bioethics. Some techniques used in clinical ART include artificial insemination, in vitro fertilization, gamete intrafallopian transfer, that is GIFT, gestational surrogate mothering, gamete donation, sex selection and pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. Issues addressed in bioethics are the appropriate use of these technologies and the techniques employed to carry out procedures for quality and ethical reviews. Assisted reproductive technology and its use directly impacts the foundational unit of society, the family. ART enables children to be conceived who have no genetic relationship to one or both of their parents. Children can also be conceived who will never have a social relationship with one or both of their genetic parents. Example, a child conceived using donor sperm. Non-infertile people in today's society, including both male and female homosexual couples, single men and women and postmenopausal women who are seeking the assistance of ART. Concerns in all situations include the child and his or her welfare, including the right to have one biological mother and father. The fragmented family created by ART can disconnect genetic, gestational and social child-parent relationships which have typically been one and the same in the traditional nuclear family. Other important bioethical issues include the appropriate use of pre-implantation genetic diagnostic screening, use, storage and destruction of excess IVF embryos and research involving embryos. ART research requires human participants, donors and donated embryos, oocytes and sperm. Ethical issues that arise in ART research surround the creation and destruction of embryos. One approach in bioethics involves preserving justice, beneficence, non-maleficence and the autonomous interest of all involved. Bioethicists contribute to ethical guidelines and moral evaluations of new technologies and techniques in ART as well as to public discourse that leads to development of national regulations and restrictions of unacceptable practices. Now, let me summarize the session. This session gives a detailed explanation on various bioethical issues including cloning, surrogacy and IVF. The ethical issues raised by each of these techniques are highlighted here. The pros and cons of artificial reproduction in each case helps to identify the imbalance that create within bioethics. Bioethics is concerned with questions about basic human values such as the rights to life and health and the rightness or wrongness of certain developments in healthcare institutions like life technology, medicines, health professions and about society's responsibilities for the life and health of its members. Bioethics involves issues relating to the beginning and end of human life all the way from issues relating to in vitro fertilization and abortion to euthanasia and palliative care. Here are some assignments for you to work out. What are the impacts of artificial reproduction? How surrogacy can be justified in a society? What are the drawbacks of a cloned individual regarding his personhood? Examine the ethical and moral dilemmas in various bioethical issues. Explain how surrogacy exploits women's health from a feminist perspective. Here I can suggest some books for your further studies. Number 1, Bioethics, written by Edwards Remby and Glenn C. Graber, published by Harcourt Brace Jovanovic Publishers, London, 1988. Number 2. Bioethics, Readings and Cases, written by Bodhi Baruch, A&H, Tristram Engelhardt, and published by Pearson Publishers, Delhi, 2007. Number 3. Principles of Biomedical Ethics, written by Beauchamp, Tom and Childress, James F., published by Oxford University Press, Oxford, 1979. Number 4. Questioning Ethics, Contemporary Debates in Philosophy, written by Dooley Mark and Richard Caney, published by Routledge, London, 2002. Thank you for watching this session. See you next time. Until then, bye.